And also we kind of had this witchy feeling of like, we're women, ergo we are allowed to do what we want because we are oppressed by the church de facto. So I'm not taking you to church.
Welcome to Not Right Now, the podcast about parenting through all of this. We have a guest today. She's awesome. Her name is Meghan Murphy-Gill. She's a Chicago-based Episcopal priest, former hospital chaplain. She's a mom and the author of the book, The Sacred Life of Bread, Uncovering the Mystery of an Ordinary Loaf, which is just fantastic. Meghan's writing on food and spirituality and culture has appeared in the New York Times, in Chicago Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, Vice, New York Magazine, Modern Farmer, the Chicago Tribune, the Utne Reader, National Catholic Reporter, and many more. I'm not going to read them all here. We had just such a wonderful conversation. This one definitely could have gone on longer if I didn't have to deal with my kids. Not right now. You can keep up with Meghan's work at her very occasional Substack called God Talk, which is a delight. And it's in the link in our show notes. Please enjoy this conversation with Meghan.
I was looking back for a photo of his last day of kindergarten, and there's all these pictures of him hugging James and holding hands and laying together. So last night, Paul's had a big growth spurt, and James is really short and Paul's really tall. And I said, hug each other so I can see the difference. And the best I could get was that Paul gently touched James on the shoulder for a second, and that was it. That was all I got.
That's where we are. And like my kids are pretty close, but it's still just like, I'm not here. I told my wife, like I saw some quotes like, never forget, your children didn't choose to be born and they didn't choose their parents. I was like, I don't care. You're welcome.
That's right.
Sorry.
You want them to be decent people. Because I mean, anytime Albie acts like that, I just think, I know that they're not going to do that in the real world. You're just getting it all out with me.
Yeah,
I don't think. I hope they're not doing that outside of our house.
Right.
Yeah. When they're all not here, I'm good at giving myself that talk. And then there's other times where I'm like, if you all, like I was telling Quinn last night, I gave James a challenge. I was like, can you talk to us without asking us for something ever? Because it's just constant. And I'm like, I want you to see me as a human. I know that's it's actually probably kind of like outrageous to expect, but it's hard. I'm like, how do people have a good attitude about this all the time? Because I'm feeling bad about my attitude right now. So
Claire, I think this is like the best idea you've ever had. Genuinely. I put it in our show notes. Meghan, do you know what the Bechdel test is?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. So my wife is a screenwriter, so constantly wrestling with that. But I think this is the parenting Bechdel test. Can your child speak to you for a whole day without asking for something?
Yeah.
How about an hour?
A fucking hour. Or
a
one
day
morning
I
before
wouldn't
the school bus.
Right. Even, I feel like with Albie is sometimes they forget to ask things and then just expect things to happen for them. Like they get up. I watched them get up. We live in a condo and it's reversed and the bedrooms are downstairs. And I was sitting on the couch having my coffee, looking at my phone, and they come up the stairs and I said, "Morning, Mama." And they went and sat at the kitchen island and just sat there.
Yep.
And I was like, "What are you doing?"
Food goes here. Yeah. Well, your job is to make sure that they don't end up, and Andrew's job, not just you, obviously, but they don't end up like my dad, who Quinn, I forget if I told you this or not, but on Memorial Day weekend, I'll try to condense this story, but everything is fucked with my family. And I ended up having to host Memorial Day at my parents' house. And I'm doing all this cooking. And my dad, who only grilled the burgers, looked at an onion unchopped on the counter in his house and said, "No onion? Not, can you slice this onion?"
That is some trademark boomer shit. And so.
And they forgot a chair for me. So Paul was sitting on my mom's walker at the table and I was getting mad about it. And then Paul was enjoying the walker, which made me mad. And so, yeah, at the very least say, "Can I please have some onion?" Instead of just sitting at the counter expecting.
Do you mind chopping that, please?
Yeah,
it's so
something.
No.
Would you chop that?
No.
How did you respond?
I said, "Oh, you know what I did? I did a sarcastic apology, but he doesn't get it because that's just the way he is." So I was like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't think of that." And then he was like, "It's okay." And I wanted to be like, "I wasn't really apologizing. It is you who should apologize." But I do that to James sometimes too. "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you have a better mom next time." And so, and I wonder why he isn't coming to me with like fun, sweet stories and things like that. Meghan, how's your May Semper going?
To the show.
Yeah, thanks. It's great. I don't feel like I ever get to complain about my kid. My May-December is weird because I've been in this job that has been really like all encompassing for the last 2 years. And so Andrew has really taken the lead on a lot of parenting stuff, which means I find out about things kind of too late. In some ways, it's been great because I'm like, that's your problem now. It's not mine. But as things are winding down, I've been kind of absent. I'm going to be honest. I've been a little bit of an absentee parent, but I'm actually winding down at my job. And my last Sunday is this Sunday. And so that has been kind of taking over. I'm trying to think of what Albie has had. I mean, someone told me your kid is really scheduled. And I thought all kids were really scheduled.
Yeah. Does that person have kids?
They do. I don't know what they're doing with their life, but I don't know. We have like choristers. So Albie's a chorister at the cathedral, which is that is an all involved thing. It's 3 days a week.
Wow.
And they're not really done until June. I'm sorry, I'm rambling because I was trying to think of what is my May-December. My May-December is very self-involved. I'm just winding down my stuff.
Tell Quinn about your job, what your gig was, and tell our to-be listeners what you're working on.
So I am an interim rector, which means I am the priest who comes in between what's called a settled or a called rector. So like the priest of a church is at an Episcopal church is called by, it's called the vestry. They're not appointed. They are basically apply and go through a job process, and the church themselves hires them. So when one rector leaves, there's this process that not all churches do, but I think everyone should do it, but problem is it's a little bit expensive. So the person who comes in kind of cleans up old processes, does a lot of like organizational development work with them, helps them to do some self-reflecting. I've got like a number of tools I use to see like, where were we? Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And my job for this particular one has been really looking at like just administration stuff. So it's been all encompassing with administration. There was no administration.
Oh, geez. So a lot of admin, huh?
A lot of admin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the admin stuff?
I do. I mean, it's weird. That's a hard question. I think I'm good at it, which makes it easy.
People need it. I mean, Quinn, I don't know if you guys had this going on in Virginia or if you're following it all, but in Chicago, and I know, Meghan, you're not obviously Catholic, but in Chicago, a lot of the parishes have been dwindling.
I'm a Catholic through and through to the day I die.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like, in your bones, but they've been combining parishes in Chicago because they've been having these dwindling populations, but they don't have any kind of expert to come along and make to let these communities learn how to correspond together. And sometimes you'll have people who speak literally different languages, have completely, and then, but it's on them to make this happen. And as someone who does a little bit of freelancing in the consulting world, you're like, if these were businesses, the person in charge would be making so much money doing this sort of organizational change. Yeah. But
America's entire economy is propped up by those kind of guys.
I mean, I actually been thinking maybe I chose the wrong life because I could be making a lot more money. I mean, I read all their books. Like that's what I do. So
yeah. So do you have to then listen to like the old folks who are like, well, we didn't used to do it like this, or I'm mad that the priest, whatever, has an accent that's hard to understand, or, I mean, those are things I think of from parishioners, but yeah, do you have to handle those sort of
No,
things?
It's so interesting. They're different. It's different, but the same. I think people in the Episcopal Church would love to have priests with accents they didn't understand. We're a very white church. Yeah. So that's more, let's see, the things I have dealt with it is a lot of, well, the previous rector didn't do it that way. And yeah, that's right. But your next rector might. And my job here is to set things up for success for your next rector.
Today is day one as president of the board of my children's club swim team, which I swam for about 100 years ago. And the previous board was a little negligent. And yes, I'm similarly, this is the way it's going to go now. Here's how we're going to get stuff done.
And the majority of my work the past 2 years has basically been shoring up a negligent board. We call it a vestry. And I wouldn't call them negligent. I just don't think anyone ever taught them how they're supposed to function in a church. And I mean, and then so I, of course, come at it with a lot of theological and, inspirational and spirit-led stuff. This is your job. This is how you remain accountable. And this is how you maintain a democratic process in a church. And, they elect you. And so you have these responsibilities. And It's just so funny because I think about most people who go to seminary don't ever think this is what they're going to, I mean, frankly, I think it's what you need to do to have a successful, thriving parish. But most people think I'm just going to be a really good pastoral caregiver and I'm going to preach really good sermons and I'm going to have beautiful liturgy.
My wife and I talked about that with her writings. You always think it's about doing the work, right? But often you have to work on the business or the parish or whatever it might be, because otherwise there's no, again, administration or functionality to the whole thing. But that should let you actually do a better job with the work, right?
Yeah. And that's ultimately, this is so in the weeds and so nerdy about my job, but like doing the interim work, I specifically is so that the next person can do those things.
Sure.
Right.
Mhm.
You can actually work on preaching and can work on good pastoral caregiving and actually do the work that a priest is supposed to be doing.
Well, Meghan, the priest I don't know if you followed this. I forget if we talked about this, but the priest at our kids' parish lost his job because he had a little secret fund and he was funneling a lot of the money from the parish into the fund. And it's really disappointing. And also even more disappointing is that we're like, could be worse. Catholic priest
That could be
could
way
be
worse.
worse. And
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. And it was, I mean, Paul, my kid, he wasn't thinking about it that much, but it was kind of ironic because this all came up right before the kids' confirmation. And for their school and church, they had to go to church every week. In addition to the weekly mass that they have at school, they had to also go to Sunday mass and present a signed bulletin to prove that they actually went. And I was like, if I were a kid, I would be wondering, why do I have to follow these rules if the priests are not following the rules? But it didn't occur to Paul to put that all together. And, he just kept his eye on the prize. But pretty damn depressing. And someone told me about the new priest who's coming in and the bar is pretty low, but also no one's rushing to fill the void. So I have no input. But
Yeah, that's the thing. In the Catholic Church, you absolutely have no input. It's going to get assigned.
Yes. And it's kind of sad because my dad, as a cradle Catholic, and we'll get into this, but he's given a lot to the parish. And he was pretty disenchanted, I think, when he realized that, like, when they had to combine parishes, like all that money, you don't get anything for that, which not like he thought he would, but I think he thought that maybe the buy-in would, result in something. And I feel it was like a combination of feeling bad for him and also a tiny bit of schadenfreude, as a boomerang, being like, you can't just pay for things and expect it to turn out the right way. But anyway, circling way far back to introduce Meghan and Quinn. So Meghan, I think originally we got in touch because you were editing at the time at U.S. Catholic Magazine, which is a way more progressive magazine than it sounds like it should be, at least to me. When you first came to me and you had me write something about, I think, what to do when you encounter doubt, I want to say. And does that sound familiar to you? We also had kids at the same time. And so our kids went to the same daycare as well. So we came up as witches talking about God together. Does that ring true to you or have a different memory?
The story that I remember assigning to you was about sex ed for kids.
Oh yeah, that was that one. Yes. And I loved doing that story. That was the story I learned that our pediatrician is the bomb because I interviewed him about talking to kids about sex. And he said it starts with consent. And because he would say, like, when the kids are old enough, he would say, I'm going to look at your privates now. And it's okay because I'm your doctor and your parents are here. And then he talked also about how often kids would come out to him. And he referred to that as an honor. And I have goosebumps right now. I was like, God, he's great. He's really a great person. And Quinn, he's the same doctor who was the boys' baseball coach who wouldn't give James the game ball when James thought he deserved it. And I was like, good coach.
Oh, God, fuck yeah.
Yeah. But it was a really fun piece to work on. And I talked to our friend Elizabeth, also one of your sisters in theology, and she talked about how, the talking about the body is a sacred thing and it's a beautiful thing. And, and I really appreciated that assignment because you would think, again, Catholic, prudish, repressed, and that, those things are all have their own place. But I was happy to get to explore that and look at the ways that we can, like, you don't have to lock yourself up necessarily. So, and then I did another piece for you about, should you force your kid to go to church? And I made the mistake of looking at the comments at that, but people did not agree with how I felt about it.
That magazine, we would get the most insane comments on everything. It was back during, we had conversations about whether or not we needed to have comments on our articles because the magazine was called U.S. Catholic, even though it had been had a long history of being a progressive Catholic magazine. It just invited the worst.
Yeah, as anything with God does. Like, I had never learned before that like people hate that some girls are altar servers, and I was a girl altar server.
Yeah.
My dad is still proud of how well I did the incense, because not everyone can do the incense.
It's true.
Hard.
No, there's a rhythm to it for sure.
Yeah. So, Megan, tell Quinn and everyone listening a little bit about your journey from into being a priest, and to you as Catholic, and how you came to make a career out of faith.
Make a career out of faith. It's also, I've never framed it that way. It's so interesting. Let's see. So I grew up as a Roman Catholic, as an Irish Catholic from the Northeast. I'm the first to go to college in my family. So like really working class Irish Catholics. My parents divorced and my mom was a single parent, and we didn't really go to church. But like being an Irish Catholic was just like part of who I was, part of my identity. I did all my sacraments on time. Although people now talk about their kids getting confirmed in 8th grade, but for me, it was when we were juniors in high school, which was probably important for my own development and where I ended up going. Even though we didn't go to church, every time we went, I loved it. I loved the music. I loved the theater of it. I loved thinking about what we were doing and saying. I used to read a lot of books in high school on just spirituality and faith and even astrology. Just kind of this more mystical stuff has always really intrigued me. And then when I was in college, I remember going to a Catholic church when I was feeling pretty lonely, like at Easter. College felt very lonely to me because nobody in my family had been before, and felt like I was navigating things that everyone seemed to understand that I didn't understand. By the time I was a senior, I started to go to the student church, the student Catholic church in my college, and my roommate was a Catholic, and she's like, "You should just come with us." And I'd gotten interested in that because at the same time I was studying political science and political theory, and I just had this moment where I thought, social justice, social tradition, these things kind of clicked for me, and I wanted to explore more of that. I had never intended to become a priest. That just hadn't entered my imagination as something possible. It wasn't that I ever thought that a woman shouldn't be able to be a priest. I even remember answering people when they asked me, "Well, why don't you become a priest?" I said, "Well, I don't have a calling to be that. That's not for me." There was a brief period where I thought I would enter a convent or become a nun, but one of the cool nuns, who aren't Catholics. Yeah. Because that seemed really intriguing to me. But I always say I just really like boys. It's too much. So that wasn't for me. I ended up getting a job as a campus minister at UIC for a short period of time. And through that, the priest there said, "I really think you should go to school and study theology." So I did. I went to the same school at the Pope, went to seminary, same seminary as the Pope, CTU in Chicago, Catholic Theological Union. And I thought that I was going to be an academic. This is also shortly after the clergy sex abuse scandal broke. And I thought, okay, I should study theology, and I should come back and teach in a seminary and be part of the process of helping to form better priests. And I got really into theology of priesthood and theology of orders and all of that sort of thing. And I was the only woman in those classes. I thought I was going to do a PhD, and then I was offered this job at US Catholic. When I was at that magazine as an editor, that is also when two things happened by the end of 2012, and that was Affordable Care Act passed, and the Catholic bishops acted like complete assholes about this project that these women who I'd interviewed, these nuns, had been working on for affordable health care for decades, and they had been really part of this process to make that happen. And then the bishops, these male bishops, could just waltz in and say, "We don't support this because abortion." And I just got really disenchanted with that. There was also a process. For me, it's always process is why I think I'm a good interim. There was a change in the liturgy. I don't know if you're still a Catholic. So there was a change in the translation of the liturgy from the Latin to the English. And the process by which that happened was horrible. There had been people working on new translations for a decade. And then the powers that be decided, no, we want literal translations. That's why your liturgy sucks now. Sorry.
It does suck. No, it does suck.
And the reason they wanted literal translations is they wanted to be able to use English to translate from the Latin, not from Latin to Chinese, but Latin to English to Chinese. Anyway, and I just thought, oh, this is a church that if this is the process for everything, and this is never going to change.
Mm.
So even though I did become the managing editor of that magazine, at that point I'd stopped going to a Catholic church. And then I started going, and I spent actually 3 years away. I didn't do anything. And Albie was born, and by the time Albie was a few months old, I realized that I just wanted a community. My friend one time described it as, it's nice to go to church because you can teach your kids how to get along with people who aren't their family or friends. And I thought, I want that for my kid. Also, they had free childcare on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I thought, you know what, Andrew, we can go and put Albie in the nursery and we can just sit quietly
Yeah.
for an hour
That sounds
and be around
great.
adult.
I'll believe
and have some
anything for
coffee
that.
right afterward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is great. We're going to do this. And my friend, I had been to his ordination at this church. He was also a former Roman, became an Episcopal priest. And I started, some people might say it's a mystical experience at his ordination. Maybe it was like a deeply psychological thing happening to me, is that I wept at his ordination from a place that was, I mean, I ugly cried. I was like, what is happening to me? What is going on? I looked at my friend Steve, who was with me, and I was like hiding my face because I felt so ugly and weird that I was crying so deeply. Anyway, we went there and we were like, yeah, this is nice. We're just going to be like twice a month people. And I'm never going to become an Episcopalian. I'm a Catholic and my family's Irish. And this is, you know, the Episcopalians are descended from Church of England. So yeah, that was the stupidest thing I ever said.
I am jealous of that kind of like spiritual deep cry, actually. Have you ever had that kind of experience since then?
No. Also, I mean, I wouldn't say it wasn't great. I didn't know what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not particularly, I always say that I'm an expressive person, but I'm not like the most in touch with what I'm feeling at the time.
Sure.
So
I think it's very interesting because you are a feminist and a modern person and a progressive person, and also make room for these sort of encounters with faith, which I like. I don't know. It's like important to talk. I think it's always important to shine a light on progressive people of faith, basically, to just show that the Southern evangelists don't own this shit, but
they're a blip in history.
Quinn, what was your faith like upbringing? You guys are like Irish Catholic too, right? Did you do any of the sacraments?
Loaded question, loaded answer. Family was Irish Catholic, grew up in Jersey. Parents both walked away from the church at some point long before me. My dad went to a Catholic private high school in Jersey, but, was annoying and questioned everything all the time. And then was a religious studies major at his liberal arts college. They went and lived in Israel during the Yom Kippur War and all these different things, but in a very sort of academic atheist way. My mom's parents kept going, and occasionally I would go with them. But I mean, my religion was baseball and girls, basically. But I was always encouraged, my siblings and I were always encouraged, houses just filled with books of read about it all, learn about it all. This is, the Western sort of, for a lot of folks, at least in the 90s and such, was like, especially growing up in Virginia, it was so much just church on Sundays and whatever else happens. And they were like, that's not necessarily the way the faith works throughout the rest of the world by any extent. And they were like, we don't really care if you end up deciding you believe in something or many things or whatever it is, as long as you don't use it to push it on anybody or use it to hurt anybody, because a lot of people throughout history have done that. And that's not awesome. They're like, but there are, a fundamental set of values to extract from basically most of them, whether you believe rocks are sacred or a guy on a cross. And those were beaten into us, which I appreciate, sort of a fundamental principle level. And then I ended up, of course, going to the same liberal arts school, majoring in religious studies and focusing on religious warfare and all these different things, and traveled, and I lived in the Middle East and all of the different things. So I am probably about as atheist as a person can get without being a militant monster about it. Again, not going to push that on anybody either. But I do believe we have an enormous hole where those communities used to be, certainly. I do believe that has provided folks with a lot of, like you said, formalized but also an inadvertent community with folks, like you said, that aren't necessarily your family or friends outside of that direct application of it once a week or whenever, or holidays. But obviously, it's got its issues as well. Certainly, I think everybody should see Spotlight, for example, to understand where we are. But every institution is imperfect, and we've burned most of them down at this point. But to me, it really comes down to how I'm raising my kids. Same thing. It's like, hey, man, your friends believe whatever they believe. That's wonderful for them. That's wonderful for their family. That's if they get community from it and comfort and education and a set of morals. That's not just a hobby. That's, a big thing in the rest of our work is your principles can't just be part-time, can't be a hobby. You have to apply them or else it's a hobby. Then I don't care. Great. But it's a complicated one, but not necessarily always so complicated for me, I guess.
Did you get confirmed, Quinn?
Oh God, no. No, my parents
really?
my parents never took us. If I wanted to go with my grandma, who gave me a St. Christopher's medal, which you would appreciate, I immediately lost. So just about as I want, she was just fucking perfect. Way to go.
St. Christopher doesn't show you where to go. He just
but I mean, the lesson is there, though. I mean, obviously, it was amazing. She was like, chef's kiss. Well done. No, I'd go with them sometimes, but also, went with other friends to stuff and this and that. But again, we had the kids in the New Age, heavy fundamentalist stuff, doing the praying just outside the public high school boundaries when the church, if you want to call it that, opened across the street and trying to radicalize other kids. And we also had the youth groups that could be, again, very supportive, but maybe didn't want, your gay brother to come. And so we saw a lot of flavors of all of that. So I appreciated, again, that my parents were also like, here's also the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Maybe read that. Super cool.
Oh my gosh. I'm jealous of that.
Again, they weren't pushed on us. But they were like, the questions and the answers are here. This is where. And they were like, most people read them literally. Suggest not doing that. Again, there's lessons to be found, but...
Yeah.
That is my history.
Quinn, did your family give you any pressure about baptizing the kids, or everyone was hands off by
my
that
grandparents
point?
were long gone. They knew how we felt about it. There was, again, it always came back to be a good human, which you can get the reading from any of these things, or you don't have to. But if that's where you find it and apply it, great. They'll call us on that every time.
We're in an interesting place because my dad is a cradle Catholic, the kind that I think is probably easy to be when you're sort of like a boomer man. And again, everyone sort of served up to you. And I've had different issues with his faith over my life because it was, for a long time, I just thought of church as a thing you have to go to and not enjoy or think about or anything like that. It's something to adore and something imposed upon you. But I really enjoyed my Catholic school. And then I ended up going to Georgetown, not because it was Catholic, the Jesuitness of it was sort of incidental. But then once I got to college, I finally was going to mass and being spoken to, and not just being spoken at, and that, or not just clocking, waiting for, I don't know, Megan, when was the last time you went to a Catholic mass? But you always get those milestones when you're like, oh yeah, finally communion. And that means we're in the home stretch,
I feel that way every Sunday when you celebrate mass.
Yeah. Yeah. Or when the homily is long and you're like, God damn it, who is doing, why is the priest think we want to hear this? But I finally heard them speaking to us. And then once I had Paul, I kind of was in the same spot as you, where we lived in Edgewater, not far from we went to the same daycare, our kids did. And we kind of walked into a church and there were, talking about third spaces, it was just so revelatory to sit and be quiet. And he was looking at the stained glass and then everyone's looking at him so kindly. So I wouldn't say that spurred me into a new level of faith, but I saw that there is and I know that's not uncommon at all, that kids send people back to the church. But it's been interesting to filter that obligation of my dad through to the kids, because that's still there in some part. And it's weird to put it on someone else. But also, I don't expect my kids to believe the same way that my dad did. And also as a woman, too, is part of the reason this conversation all came up is that someone in Evil Witches said, you've never talked about why you're Catholic and do your kids go to Catholic school and who pays for it, which I thought was kind of like a touchy question, but sort of pertinent as well. And my dad pays for it because it is that important to him. And he offered to pay for Paul to go to Catholic high school as well. But Paul wants to go to the public high school. And my dad's, to his credit, not making it a big deal. But when Paul was at the start of confirmation, and those who are listening who don't know what confirmation is, Megan, would you say it's appropriate to kind of equate confirmation with a bar mitzvah-ish at the age range, sort of, and sort of saying I'm committing to this faith?
Sort of. It's kind of a weird sacrament. Some people believe that it really happens at a baptism and we should only be baptizing adults. I always consider it more of like a reaffirmation of baptismal vows, especially if you've done that as a baby. So it is more associated with having the capacity to say, yes, I want to do this. This is a part of what I'm doing. I mean, because I haven't studied Judaism, but that's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
A
mean,
little bit. I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't feel comfortable saying, yes, it's the same because I don't know enough about.
No, I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't, but I equate it ish. So, I mean, I was asking Paul early in the process, do you like this? Do you like getting confirmed? And he said, not really. And part of it was that he and his friends were talking about how much it sucked that they had to, do these retreats and go to mass and whatever. And on the one hand, we're like, yeah, it does suck because I was there. I remember what it's like. It sucks. But also it was annoying that as a parent, you're like, Quinn, it's sort of like the schlepping around. You're like, I'm enabling all of this. We're driving you. This is all part of your faith formation. But I checked in with him again at the end of the, right before he actually got confirmed. And I said, do you feel the same way? And he said, no, I get it now. And I was like, okay. He didn't want to go into it deeply and I wasn't going to stir it up in him. But I told him, Steve and I we were getting kind of annoyed because he and his friend were being so flippant about once we do this, I'm never going back to church and I'm just in it for the money. I don't know what money they thought they were going to get for confirmation. I'm not sure where they got that information from. And Steve and I had to sit down with him being like, listen, we know it's not fun for you to do all this and we'll allow a certain amount of shit talk up to a point. But also there is something bigger at play here. And it was weird to sort of try to articulate. This is a family tradition and not necessarily saying like this is about belief, but this is about a culture that you're a part of and your deal, sort of like the deal you make to be part of the family, basically. And then you can go on and make the kind of choices you want to make later in life. And maybe you'll even marry a Catholic person and then you guys will be so excited because you'll be able to dig out your confirmation, certificate and all that kind of shit and trundle on down the path. But yeah, it was a weird conversation to have, but I'm glad that we did because sort of going back to the stories for U.S. Catholic, these kind of stories are always involve some sort of discomfort and probing things that you don't have the answer to, which was not fun. But I'm like, I guess that's part of the gig. That's why I call it faith and not facts, right?
I was thinking about the idea that Quinn had all these books around to answer questions, but I think that most people don't have that. Like, I mean, I definitely didn't have anything to like explore like what it meant to be a human in this world in my immediate home. And I think that's at its best that when kids get some kind of a religious education, like when religious education is doing what it should be doing, should really be about how to be a human in this world. And how to live in this world as a human being with other human beings, and not just with other human beings, but with the entire created world, just how to be a person. It seems to me that there's just, I think that some of that has shifted to like school. I mean, I just think about the social emotional learning that's part of like curriculum that Albie has at school. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot to put on teachers.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I did a story for you also on social emotional learning and how that fits in with Catholic teaching. I believe that was maybe the story where I talked to some guy who told me that putting kids in timeout was child abuse. That was unrelated, but that really stuck with me because I probably put him in timeout earlier that day, and I bristled at the idea that timeout was child abuse. But
I mean, I was abused my entire childhood. I remember standing in a corner with my nose in the corner next to my sister.
Oh, what did you guys do?
Laugh. That was the point. Like my dad was trying to make us stop fighting, and put us in a corner together. And first it was very annoying, and then it became funny.
So Albie's singing in this choir at the cathedral. Are they also getting like a religious education at the same, so what does that look like for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, formation for kids is I think I told you this earlier on the phone. Like, I'm not an expert in children's formation. In fact, every time I've gotten hired, people are like, oh, we can make the woman in charge of formation for kids. And I'm like, that's not my deal. But I also do think it's incredibly important. And part of why we ended up where we are now as a family with me being a priest is because a lot of the questions in the way Albie was asking and the way Albie was being. And it became really clear to me that giving this kid some formation opportunities was going to be really important. The thing with the choir, it's a very kind of old-fashioned way to do formation for kids. It comes out of actually English choir schools, so it is pretty old-fashioned. But the choir master, the organist director, whatever of it, is really high expectations of those kids. They sing music that is hard for me to sing as an adult. They learn parts that are they're getting a music education alongside of the theological stuff. And so he'll pause and he'll ask questions. What do you think this means? And a lot of the singing with the cathedral a lot of it is liturgical. And so that allows what I think is important about going to church is when a liturgy is done well and done, I would say, I don't like to say in the right way, but when it's done well, like the liturgy and attending itself is a formation opportunity. You get this chance to wonder and listen and think about things. It's not just questions and answers. I think so much in American culture, especially, we think of formation as, what's the answer to this? What happens to us after we die? Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's just more to formation than that. There's more. I mean, when Albie gets to sing, they have this little community with their fellow choristers. And I remember one time someone describing, like, when you sing in a choir, you're breathing together. And I thought, that's great. I mean, Albie's not having those thoughts. They're having those experiences. And to me, that feels like really good formation.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. And I mean, I was, while I was thinking about the church thing and the confirmation, like Paul was bitching about it. And I was thinking, I wanted to be like, most of the time it sucks for kids. Sometimes it's fun, or maybe they have a nice time, but John Mulaney had a bit about how being a Catholic kid, people would be like, what did they do? What did they make you do? And he's like, well, my parents made me do everything. I didn't decide any part of my life. So, and I was like, yeah, I don't imagine there's like a ton of formations for kids that are like super fun that the kids, maybe they are, maybe there's different religions or it depends on the kid, but where the kid's like, yes, I can't wait to go and learn about God and probe and think and things like that. But maybe that's just us.
That said, I do think that there are like questions that kids ask and that even we ask as adults that are really hard to explore, because especially as adults, we would say there's actually not a correct answer to what happens to us after we die. I mean, the church would say we go to heaven, right? But what's heaven? And I just always think every answer just makes you have more questions. But kids don't think like that. At least this is the experience of all the kids that I have experienced in church. They don't think like that. They're not like, I wonder. So there's this program in the Episcopal Church called Godly Play, and it's a very Montessori-based approach to doing school formation, and it's for the youngest kids. And to me, I feel like it's so reversed. It really should be for the oldest kids. So you do this telling of a parable and you bring out this special box, and it's a gold box because parables are a gift. It's all this kind of silliness to me, although people love it. It's very Montessori. And you tell the story and you have these little characters and you show the story happening of this parable that Jesus said. And then you don't ever say, this is what this means. You say, I wonder. So there's the parable of the farmer throwing the seeds. And you're like, I wonder what his name was. I wonder what kind of seeds they were. And it's great. But then you end up with all these kids who can't answer questions about the tradition that they're a part of. And I love those questions, but I think that those are the questions that we should be asking kids in confirmation. At that point, they should be able to say, well, yeah, we do this thing when I have the Eucharist, it's this. I don't shy away from having kind of pat answers for younger kids, knowing that the stuff is going to open up later on.
Yeah, it's sort of analogous to the sex ed stuff a little bit. I mean, where at certain ages and stages, you give them little bits of information, and then they get older and you are giving them way bigger. Quinn, I mean, this is, again, it's about sex kind of, but I did one of my little talks with Paul because no one else was in the house, and he's going to start high school next year. And the high school has a daycare for the kids who are moms who go, and I also remember being that age and suddenly meeting kids who were way more sophisticated than me. And by which I mean fucking, basically. And I told him, I was like, you're going to be around kids who are a lot more mature than you. And just so you know, I'm here for you to talk about it. And I'm sure he's whatever. And I'm sure he won't talk to me about it. But, he's going to go to school with Jewish kids for the first time. I think he has one Jewish kid in his class. But, I don't think he knows hardcore atheists. I remember how shocked they were. There was a show on PBS when they were kids called Kindergarten. It was just like a documentary series about kindergarten. I think it might be on Max. If anyone's listening, it's a good watch to watch with your kids. Not a guilt-free kind of watch, but it was Christmas time, and they're talking to all these kids about Santa, and there's just like one Jewish kid, and he's even though he's 5, he just gives off this like 60-year-old man vibe, and he just is like shaking his head being, there's no Santa. And my kids were so offended and shocked that would happen. But I'm like, yeah, that's going to be your life as soon as like you're going to be around all these people who are going to push back against you, but in a good way. That's important. But we'll see if he listened at all. I don't know. Quinn, do you ever like hint of whatever you consider spirituality? Like, when does that strike you? If it's not God, if it's something, when are the moments that you feel connected to whatever we're part of right now?
It depends. People helping people is pretty profound and feels, it's not rare, even though we all feel that way. There's a really compelling and frustrating, actionable survey out there that our friends at Covering Climate Now did. It's a society of journalists, climate journalists around the world. And it's a study, it's called the 89% problem, whatever. Basically, 89% of people believe that climate change is a huge problem, but that no one else cares about it but them. But if 89% of people feel that way, it turns out most of us feel that way. We're just not connected in that way. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to help people see that and feel that, participate in that. But I think there's really something there. It's very empowering to people. It's very empowering to see and take part of, whatever it might be. But I also think, just like you said, kids discovering the world. And what is it? The Kruger effect? What is that called? Where you learn a little bit and think you know everything, and then the more you learn, you realize you know nothing, and then you start the hard process. And I feel like that's kids reading any sort of books, right? They're like, oh, I got the answer. It's you got your foot in the door. Now you're fucked, because now you're going to find out everything you don't know. I remember my oldest kid going, my wife always calls, she's like, oh, I get where all the white guy confidence comes from now that she has 2 of them that she made. The oldest one going, we were at soccer practice, whatever you want to call it, when they were 5 or something. We're on the car ride home. He's still strapped in a car seat. And he's like, I think I got soccer now. And we're like, cool, what's that mean? Like, you're into it? He's like, no, I think I'm good. I'm ready. I'm like, ready for what? He's like, I've got soccer down. I was like, do you know, like my team, I lived over there's Liverpool, and long story, their whole ethos is you'll never walk alone. That's profound if you actually apply it equally. And I remember saying to him, Liverpool guys, they practice every day. And he was like, why? What are you talking about? I was like, because the more you do something, the more you find out you don't know about it or how far you have to go. I was like, and that is incredibly frustrating, and hopefully at some point becomes a self-awareness that is lovely. But, when you're a kid, it's gnarly, it's gnarly, but hopefully is beautiful. And that's, part of the reason I feel like teachers should make $1 million. Baseline is, the best ones who have the support to do that are constantly seeking to help kids do that as much as they can, giving them books that challenge them or make them question things or introduce them to worlds and people that they just never would otherwise encounter. So I don't know. I guess that's my long answer to it. In the sort of where do you go after you die? I don't know if it's the unknown or purely atheist biological thing or the Judaism side of it. It's like the certainty is like you're here for the next few minutes. And so we're going to use the time that we got here. There's not a lot else that's concrete and promised. So I'm trying to help them, though it drives my children crazy half the time. They're just like, can we stop? Like, what is the Hamilton quote? Writing like you're running out of time. They're like, it's enough of the hugs. I have to go to class.
My kid has started doing this. This sounds not like I'm bragging here, but it is actually a very sweet thing. Albie is in 6th grade, and they're finishing 6th grade. And Claire knows my husband, Andrew. Andrew's really tall, 6'5", and Albie is not yet as tall as I am. And they're just waiting because they
wait. How tall are you?
I'm 5'4".
Oh, okay. So they're like, what's it going to be?
When is this coming for me? I'm going to be tall, right? I'm going to be tall. And we're like, we don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Also, you have no control over it.
No control
Best
over
wishes.
it. I actually offer them every morning. They go, I'm tired. And like, do you want some coffee? And they're like, no, I'm trying to grow tall.
That's so funny.
But the thing I was going to say is that they're still such a little kid, and I know it's going to change. I know we're just on the cusp because they're becoming really sassy, all the things the boys do. Their name's Albert, but they identify as non-binary. So I did ask if I could say that, and Albie said yes. Okay. So
all right, go Albie.
They told me like earlier this week, they're like, do you know that for a hug to count, you have to hug for 15 seconds? And I was like, I don't think that's true. What does count mean? You mean like you have to count for it to count? And they're like, no, we have to hug for 15 seconds.
Oh
So
my
they've been
God.
giving me a hug every morning for 15
Oh,
seconds.
hold on
Oh,
to that shit as long
Megan.
as you can, man.
You know when was the
So
last time I got a
sweet.
hug from my kids that involved both arms? I don't like, I have to make them, I get this real quick, one of these.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
such a dick about it. They give me like the pat in the morning. I'm like, start over. Don't care. That doesn't count.
No,
Yeah.
I
There is
gotta
something
force them.
about having an only child too. I mean, I think there's a little bit of that going on, but
Sure.
I don't
Sure.
know. I hope it lasts, but I don't think it will. I know it won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it though. I mean, I more call Paul like a little baby. I'm like, you little baby. I mean, he's taller than me now, but he's, because I can, and he's here. But but it was
Well-
interesting that you mentioned astrology, Megan, because I was like, I do. There is something about the solstice, like the winter and summer solstice, that like gets to me, and a lot of it might just be being like a bug crawling on the planet, where you're like, I don't know, but there's something very deep to me about the longest and shortest day of the year, and that does something to me. And then it's funny, and I still have this on my desk, even though it's summertime. It's almost summertime now, but the kids' school does lessons and carols, which is like,
Oh yeah.
not mass, but it kind of is, and it's like a lot
Wait,
of
did you do it during this season?
during the Christmas,
Oh,
during
Christmas
the
season. Yeah. I was
yeah.
like, no one does lessons and carols now, but that's
No, I know. But I saved it because
bet.
there was a song, a meditation about Mary, and it was about from her perspective. I might get choked up. I'm gonna try not to, but it was like about her fear and just the terror and not knowing what to do and wanting some guidance and who am I and what is happening to me. And I was like, boy, you don't see that ever. You never see the human side of Mary. You only see the Madonna version of her, who is just
Come to my
perfect.
church, you get a whole different, yeah.
Yeah.
I talk about Mary all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talk about Mary all the time. Yeah. For different reasons than you usually hear, virgin and pure mother or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't get into that. I love Mary. I think Mary is the model for all of us, at least for Christians. She's the model for all of us, which is
Do you think she ever
being
yelled at
willing to
Jesus?
go on a big adventure. What?
Do you think she ever yelled at Jesus?
Oh, for sure.
There's an incredible book. Sorry. There's no other place to interject this. It's called Lamb, and it's like the story of Biff, Jesus' childhood best friend. And it is a novel, and it is profound, but also
I'm gonna write this down.
it is so funny. It's probably, God, I don't know, 25 years old. Lamb, the story of Biff, Jesus' childhood best friend. It's fantastic. And it's him as like the third wheel with Mary and like all the things, and Jesus going through like when Biff starts sleeping with girls and Jesus is like, oh man, what's it? What are we dealing with? It's great. But yeah, there's many faces to Mary, certainly.
This is, again, I know we're switching between Episcopalian and Roman Catholic, but I am curious, did either of you guys read the encyclical from the Pope about AI that came out this week?
No, my husband read it. I have not read it yet.
What did
Yeah.
Andrew say about it?
Andrew said he thought it was interesting and good, but that's all I got from him.
Okay. Yeah. I sent it off to my friend Elizabeth too. I was like, did you read it? She's like, that's on my docket for the weekend, and I'm waiting for her to tell me what to make of it. Quinn, did you read it?
I have not had a chance. My children don't let me do anything. I'm solo parenting this week, so
The most I've read is just the headlines about it.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love this Pope. He can, I hope he doesn't let me down because, he's our White Sox Pope. So, but also if, the Trump administration doesn't like this Pope, I'm like, well, then he's awesome and I'm ride or die for him. And
But it helps that the White Sox are playing their asses off for the first time in a while, to be honest. You can see the link a little bit.
Yeah. And what is the Jesus in the paintings? Is he doing that? There's like a whatever. But Steve and I, before kids, we were in Vatican City. I took him on a trip around Italy, and we went to the Vatican, and we were looking around, and we were really crabby. I remember because they were so touristy. And we were like dithering about what to do, where to go home, if we should go. And we saw this line starting to form in St. Peter's Basilica, the square. And we kind of just got in line because whatever else was going. And someone gave us these passes, and we ended up seeing Vespers in the Basilica that the Pope said. And it was Benedict, which is sort of a flop Pope, honestly.
Yeah.
Like he's the least popular one in our lifetime. But because we saw him in person and he had a beautiful speaking voice, I have a soft spot in my heart for Benedict, even though, again, no one likes him. And he's the German Pope, had to be, Nazi youth Pope. But, but it was cute because Steve was wondering whether it'd be sacrilegious to take pictures of the Pope in the Basilica. And then all these little nuns had their cameras out, just little shutterbugs. And I was like, if they can do it, then we can do it for sure.
Well, I think you get time off of purgatory for having an audience with the Pope. I still think that's actually a teaching.
Oh, okay. All right. Good for me. All right. Very nice.
It's a Caddyshack quote, so you got that going for you.
It'll be interesting with Paul because he's going to be a free, I liked sending the kids to Catholic school and that we sort of like offloaded their religious training. And I have another friend, Megan, and our kids did confirmation together and we didn't go to their masses with them because we were like, we already were confirmed. And also we kind of had this witchy feeling of we're women. Ergo, we are allowed to do whatever the fuck we want because we are oppressed by the church de facto. So I'm not fucking taking you to church. You can take yourself to church.
You're like all the priests worth, like you're like who they're shaking their hands going, just get the parents to come.
Yeah, no, you can have my child, but not me. And and I think he thinks he's completely off the hook. But I sort of told him, you might want to go with we call my dad Jaja, which is Polish for grandpa. You might need to go to church with Jaja, and so my mom is very ill, not very ill. She's, I don't know what the word is, memory wiped, let's say. And I'm happy that my dad has church now. I'm glad he has that, at least some sort of something for him. And I hope that Paul will go with him and be a part of that, because there are parts of Mass always, even like when there's the worst, most mundane homily, when you shake hands, I love that part of church. Or when you just pray for whoever your intentions are. Like that's a good part, and I hope he carries something like that with him. I don't know. We'll see how that goes, but
that's part of when you do the shaking hands, is the passing of the peace. And the idea, the intention in the liturgy, talking about it being formational, is about reconciling yourself to your neighbor before you go to communion.
Yeah.
It's about reconciliation. And frankly, like how much stuff do we have? I am not interested in being an apologist for church, but I will just speak from my own experience. And even from my experience of I meet with a lot of parents of young kids who are like, I'd like to make my way back to this, but this was my experience in the past and I don't want that. I can't change that past experience for anybody, but what I can say that what I hope the thing that I can offer, or at least the way I do things, is like, and church, and not just me, but like what church and liturgy and a church community can offer is not even just like a place to go do good things in the world and not just a place to be in community with each other, but a place to like encounter stories of this happening throughout human history and to like a connection to the past as well as a connection to the future. I get a little, in my head about it, but like that to me ultimately is why I keep showing up. Personally, it's why I keep showing up. I don't always like it. Like I said, sometimes I'm like, oh God, I just got to get to communion because it's almost over. And I'm the one saying the sermon,
You're like,
we hear that.
Yeah. I tell people I'm usually pretty open about this. I don't think my bishop will listen to this and she won't care anyway. But really, I personally consider myself pretty agnostic, but faithfully agnostic. I just don't know. For me, it's just the most honest way to be. And what else could I do? I love all of the traditional parts of it. And I love it when something just clicks and goes, oh yeah. And I like it when something makes no sense to me or does not matter to me. And you see it really click for somebody else. And someone else has made some kind of meaning out of something or found something they were seeking. And it's like a real gift to be a part of it. And for other people, even when I'm like, okay, now I got to go home and pick up the kid from school. Bye.
The mystery of faith.
By the way, I had to do more of that chanty stuff in the Episcopal Church than I ever encountered. Because again, I was done with the Catholic Church by 2012, but I do a lot more of that kind of old timey stuff.
When you tell people, like when they meet you and you tell them that you're a priest, do you get a lot of people either telling you, like, being like, convince me, like, make, or coming at you and being like, that's bullshit? Like, how do you have to be? Do you feel defensive about what you do?
I was thinking about the last time so I'm taking a pottery class right now, and which has been just amazing. I'm ready to quit everything and just become a potter. I'm enjoying it so much, and they wanted us to say what we do, and I was like, oh, I hate this question because I always think, do I just say I run a small nonprofit, or do I say that I'm a priest?
Not correct.
It's not correct. It's just not completely forthcoming. And then for some reason, I just decided, a bunch of artists said, I'm an Episcopal priest. And everyone was like, I think there's a lot. I'm obviously the oldest woman in this class too. I thought I was going to be around all these middle-aged women, but it turns out a bunch of
I thought you'd be the
people.
youngest one there. Yeah. Well, okay.
So many young people. And I think most of them were like, we don't know what that is. And then the woman next to me asked me, and she was asking kind of a lot of around questions like, well, and then everyone, often what I encounter is, well, I used to go to a church, but I don't do it anymore because of blah, 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 blah. So a friend of mine, before I got ordained, told me that when I wear my collar, it just becomes a big projection screen for people. And it is very true. It is actually, it's funny. I have a lot of stories about showing up in a collar where I was like, forgot that I had it on. And the way people respond to me is always interesting. I've gotten, is that a costume? And that was around Halloween. And I was like, no, it's actually my job. I forgot to take it off. There's a pride parade at my kid's school. And at the last week of May, first week of June. And I came straight from work and I was in my collar, and the looks I got were like, it doesn't, I had a gay pride shirt on with the collar because I had to go do something else for work. And I was like, yeah, I'm not wearing this collar again, especially to a pride parade, like at the school. Yeah. People bring all this stuff to it.
Yeah. That's very powerful though, too. That would have been very cool. When my brother got married to a man, and obviously they didn't get married in the church, but like my dad, it was right before COVID that they had their wedding celebration, and my dad was so happy and having so much fun. And he talked about, like, I heard him working it out in real time as this, because when my brother first came out, my dad was very Catholic. He blamed himself. He kind of thought I think he maybe thought there was still time to undo it, or whatever. And then over time, he was like, why is it anybody's business what anyone does? And I was like, right on. And that was like kind of just the very fact that he could make a tiny change like that, or not a tiny change, a huge change, but just that made me very happy for him that he could open his mind a little bit like that and let that in, and not like my brother has any kind of faith tradition of his own. That what's kind of funny is that his
husband married in my church. We affirm marry him.
His husband is in the Sisters of Indulgence. Do you know that group? It's they dress up like nuns, basically nuns in drag, and it's an activist group. Yeah, so I am married into the faith, just in a slightly funhouse mirror kind of way, but
I mean, that's all we do. That's all priests are doing every Sunday anyway. That's what I say. When we do the liturgy, we're in drag.
How many collars do you have?
How many collars do we have?
Yeah, do you have like seasonal holiday options?
One? Yeah.
This is like such a weird question. It's not a weird question. It's a great question, but I'm like, it's just, it's called Clericool. It's made in Italy. It attaches to a shirt. I have probably 4 full collars, and I actually prefer to wear what's called a tab collar. So when you see someone with a little square, it's a tab collar, and you just slide it into a shirt. It's more comfortable, but that looks very like Roman Catholic, but I still wear it. I don't know. I probably have 8 or 9. I keep them in my car. I keep them in
That's great. It's like water bottles, just in case.
Sure. It's like under the back seat. You're like, that'll do. Haven't washed it in a while, but we'll take it.
That's right.
Did you and Andrew, remind me, you guys didn't have a Catholic wedding, I presume, in the church?
So Andrew's dad is a Methodist minister, retired, and Andrew grew up as a pastor's kid. And when we got married 20 years ago next week.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. We decided to have his dad do the wedding, and I never got a dispensation. I guess I've always been a little like, I don't care. Yeah, you have your rules. I just can do what I want to do. We just never got a dispensation, and we were married, by his dad outside, not a Catholic wedding.
Oh, wow. Okay, scandalo. I know I'm old. When I went to a wedding last year, and we went to California, and it was in wine country, and we stayed on the shuttle. You know how weddings are. Like, it's such a song and dance, and we get there, and it's beautiful. And the ceremony took less time than it took to sit down. And I knew I was old when I was like, that's it. Not a reading, not a poem, not anything. But whatever. Like, good luck to them. But I was like, come on, let me
some ceremony to this. Like,
I was proud of ours. We had ceremony. We had 2 readings, and the whole thing still clocked in at 17 minutes. It was, but people were like, we're crying. This is really great. I was like, every word's got to count here, guys, because we got to get to having a good time.
Party. Yeah.
We got married in the and I think it was a Protestant church at Northwestern campus, and I should remember the name of it right now, but we were going to get married in the 1950s church, but the Shield Center, and but it's under construction, which we didn't realize until after
That's
the
Catholic. Shield Center is Catholic.
yeah. So, but we ended up going to the other church across the street because the Shield Center was under construction, which we didn't know about until we sent the invitations out. My mom handled that well. I'm sure that was when she had her first stroke. And but honestly, the church, the non-Catholic church, was much more attractive than the Shield Center, which was very like drop ceiling, carpet, all carpeted, So this,
I wonder if it was an Episcopal church.
God, I have to look up Northwestern Church. My parents used to always call it the where the King and Queen of Evanston live, which is a Northwestern Church building. I'll have to figure it out. I should know this because it's where I got married, but it's not what it is. But it's the one on the lake, religious buildings. I figured this out. But I was just curious because one thing that Catholics do that I think is kind of cool or a good idea anyway is there's a thing called Pre-Cana. Quinn, do you know what that is?
Not sure I do.
Okay, it's kind of like mandatory marriage counseling, basically, that you have to do before. Oh, hey, here you go. I got married in the Garrett Garrett Theological Seminary, which is a very beautiful, like castle-looking building. Yeah, it's like marriage counseling, but it's one day in its group, which is very weird because you are sitting with all these people at a table that you've never met before, and it was downtown Chicago, so a lot of young, urbanite people, and then I think 90% of the people in the room were doing what we were doing, which is like our parents want us to do it. And this is very important. And like people leading the discussion kind of seemed normal. And then they started saying some bullshit about how they wish they had more kids and that they hadn't used birth control to have a small family. And we're like, shut the fuck up. And then at one point they send you off. And again, this is horrifying and also kind of cool, where they're like, basically, now you have to go talk about sex amongst yourselves and what that means, what that's going to mean for you. And we were in a big conference room, and they're like, go find a spot. Basically, there's no private area. And so Steve did not like that at all. I certainly wasn't a big fan of it, but he really was resistant for some reason.
Were there parameters or like discussion starters besides go talk about sex?
Kind of talk about what this means to you, expectations, values. All I remember is that it was deeply uncomfortable for Steve, and I was like, oh, this is good. This is important. The discomfort of this is going to be something that we like may have to encounter. And so but if you talk to any Catholic young people who've gotten married, they all have good stories about Pre-Cana. Meghan, the Justin Kaufman and Julie Coe, I believe. Theirs was led by a couple who they were both little people who were in a huge fight, and they were leading Pre-Cana at the same time. And it's very memorable to me, because how could that not stick in your mind? It's just having to, just go through this bizarre experience already as it is, and then this couple is leading it, and they obviously hate each other, and you have to listen to them, and then
tell you about the bonds of marriage.
Yes.
One more enter into, and you can never undo.
You're never getting out of it.
I told
ever.
My dad. So my mom, again, she's in this bad place, right, where she's either yelling at him or kind of not talking to him. And I told him, I was sort of kidding, sort of not. I was like, you should have an affair or you should divorce her. And he said, I made this vow. And I was like, all right, I guess. I mean, I suppose if he takes it pretty seriously. So he will go to heaven, that's for sure. And he will see his grandchildren there because we force them to be Catholic. But Meghan, when were you a hospital chaplain, Meghan? Was that when Albie, were you a mom when you were also working as a chaplain?
2020.
Oh my God. So what was that like? Did you have any kind of process from going to the hospital and going home and putting on your mom hat and how you got your head right for that?
Yeah. Well, I had to do an internship in order to prepare for priest to be ordained. And I started in January 2020, and it was already just a wild experience. So I did mine at Rush, which is also the infectious disease center in the region. And it was, I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing. I also love medical things. Being in a hospital was really interesting and wild and kind of exciting for me. I mean, including trips to the morgue and being with, I don't know, I was fine with all of it. And then pandemic hit. So I would say the way I transitioned back, and even now, to me, it feels very similar, although I'm doing different things, is that I live in Edgewater, and Rush is like a 35 to 40-minute drive, depending traffic. So the drive was a time for me to ponder and decompress and think about things. I did also experience a lot of very hard things in the hospital that made me feel, I experienced them as a mom. Like I experienced a mom witness her college son's death. And that was really hard. And I remember coming home and crying a lot. But the way it did make me just think about just life in general. It did prepare me to be a better priest and be a better accompanying people through hard things. But it also taught me a lot. I'm already good at compartmentalizing, but it made me just to be more aware of when I need to do those things. So even Andrew doesn't know all the things that I did and saw at the hospital, just because I think they would be really hard for him to hear.
My sister-in-law, who's one of the most wonderful people and extremely empathetic, in fact, both my sisters-in-laws, mental health professionals. She's a social worker and did hospice care for a long time when her kids were very little. And I just used to think, how do you not come home and drink? And of course, she's 1,000% better human than I am. She's like, it's the most wonderful thing. And I was just like,
hospice care is amazing.
It's incredible.
And hospice nurses are the best. They're so good. And I think it takes a certain kind of person who has a certain ability to self-differentiate and to know that what they're doing is really important and to be really present in it. And also it's not their story.
Yeah. No, for sure. That's incredible.
So Paul's graduating on Saturday, so I got to go get my nails painted because it's all about me. So I got to get myself ready before we go back into the church. His gown is hanging in the shower to steam and everything like that. But Meghan, I'm so glad we could talk.
I could do this all day, Meghan, for sure.
I'm so grateful for you and my friends who are like, I asked Elizabeth Block, our other theologian friend, I was like, why do you do this? Because she's also a feminist. She talks a lot about trans identity and things like that at SLU where she teaches. And she says, I'm here to make good trouble. And I think about that a lot. And, because it would be very easy to turn your back on all the shitty systems. And so I'm grateful for people like you, especially moms, really important. It's not even to necessarily say we're going to send our kids to heaven or whatever, but just to show you can contain a lot of hard things all at once. And those hard things are worth thinking about. So I'm glad you're out there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Really helpful for me too, articulating why I'm still doing these things. So thanks for having me.
Head to notrightnow.show for more, or send us feedback, questions, horror stories, doxing, whatever it is, at questions@notrightnow.show.